He had achieved everything. The promotion he had planned for years, the apartment in a neighborhood that once seemed unattainable, the recognition of those who doubted him, the photos that proved that life was finally in the right place. And yet, the morning after his latest great achievement, he woke up with the same feeling as always, as if something essential had been forgotten, as if real life was still waiting to begin, but he didn't know where or when. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't visible dissatisfaction, it was something more subtle, a question he couldn't formulate but which occupied every silence, a restlessness that didn't fit into any happy hour conversation, because everyone was busy celebrating exactly what he had achieved. Perhaps you recognize this feeling, not as depression or failure, but as background noise that persists even when everything should be fine. It's the kind of discomfort that doesn't show up in social media posts, because there's no language for it. There's no legitimate complaint when objectively life is working. But the discomfort is there, discreet, persistent, waiting. And the answer we always get is the same. Keep searching, keep conquering, keep optimizing your life until the feeling passes. Except it never completely goes away, does it? Because there's something deeply strange going on. We spend our entire lives chasing milestones of achievement, graduation, stable employment, serious relationships, dream vacations, desirable bodies, robust bank accounts, and each one brings temporary relief followed by emptiness. Not a dramatic emptiness, just the quiet realization that the promise wasn't fulfilled, that what was supposed to fill us up didn't. Jim Carrey, at the height of his fame and fortune, said something disconcerting. "I wish everyone could be rich and famous and have everything they ever dreamed of, so they could see that it's not the answer. It's not the answer. But if achievement, recognition, pleasure, and fulfillment are not the answer, what is?" This question is not new. In fact, it has haunted humanity for millennia. And 2,500 years ago, a man who had literally everything, wealth, power, youth, protection from any suffering, abandoned it all to find an answer. What he discovered was not what he expected. And it's definitely not what 99% of people think when they ask about the purpose of life. The answer is not to seek more happiness. It is not to optimize life to maximize positive moments. It is not to finally achieve that thing that will fill the void. The answer lies in understanding why the emptiness exists, why no achievement is enough, why even when we have what we wanted, something still seems to be missing, and more importantly, how to free ourselves from this endless search. Because the uncomfortable truth is this: as long as you are looking for happiness in the next milestone, the next pleasure, the next validation, you are reproducing exactly the mechanism that generates dissatisfaction. You are scratching an itch that never stops itching. You are drinking salt water to quench your thirst. There is an invisible structure at work, a pattern that repeats itself with every desire fulfilled and every goal achieved. And until you see this pattern clearly, until you recognize the hidden mechanics of desire itself, you will continue to walk in circles, calling it progress. This is not a video about how to be happier. It's not about gratitude techniques or mindfulness sold as a product. It's not about replacing one motivational narrative with another. It's about recognizing something that is already happening, something you feel but never knew how to name. And when you finally see it, when the structure becomes visible, there is no going back. The Buddha did not offer happiness. He offered something much more valuable, the cessation of suffering. And to understand the difference between these two things, we must first face a brutal truth about how modern life has conditioned us to pursue exactly what keeps us trapped. Modern society has constructed an extremely convincing narrative. The purpose of life is to be happy. From childhood, we are trained to pursue milestones that supposedly deliver happiness. Good grades lead to good universities. Good universities lead to good jobs. Good jobs lead to stable relationships, home ownership, memorable trips, social recognition. And at each stage, the promise is the same. When you get there, you will be happy. In many Western countries, the pursuit of happiness is considered a fundamental right. We measure success in terms of visible achievements, social status, and the pleasures we can buy. Modern advertising works entirely on this premise. More comfort, more pleasure, more experiences equal more happiness. It's a simple equation, linear, logical, and completely false. Because there is a baffling psychological phenomenon at work. The more people pursue happiness as a direct goal, the less happy they become. Researchers such as Iris Mouse have discovered something paradoxical. Individuals who intensely value happiness and actively pursue it report lower levels of well-being and more loneliness than those who do not make happiness an explicit goal. It's what some psychologists call the happiness paradox. You try to force happiness and it slips through your fingers. You obsessively plan a perfect birthday or holiday, and you end up stressed, disappointed, frustrated with details that didn't turn out exactly as you imagined. The attempt to control and maximize happiness creates exactly the opposite: performance anxiety, fear of not being happy enough, a constant feeling that something is missing. As an analysis in Time magazine put it bluntly, there are reasons to believe that the pursuit of happiness can be a recipe for misery. But why does this happen? Because when we treat happiness as a goal to be achieved, we turn every moment into an evaluation. Am I happy right now? Should I be happier? Why am I not as happy as I expected? The mind cannot rest. Every experience becomes a test, and most fail to deliver the promised emotional intensity. In addition, there is a brutal comparison effect at work. Social media amplifies this exponentially. Your feed is a meticulous curation of other people's best moments: exotic trips, professional achievements, seemingly perfect relationships, sculpted bodies, radiant smiles. What you don't see are the doubts, the failures, the sleepless nights, the strained relationships behind the photos. As one psychiatrist observed, we rarely talk about horrible things in public because it's unpleasant and rude to talk about terrible things. So everyone keeps up the facade. Everyone performs happiness. And you, comparing your complex inner reality with the external performance of others, naturally feel that you are falling behind, that your happiness is suboptimal compared to the invisible standard that everyone else seems to be achieving. But no one is achieving it. Everyone is pretending just as much as you are. And there is another mechanism at work, perhaps the cruelest of all. Even when you finally achieve something that should bring lasting happiness, a big promotion, a marriage, a significant accomplishment, the positive emotion lasts surprisingly little. Psychologists like Dan Gilbert have extensively documented the phenomenon of hedonic adaptation. Important positive events increase happiness temporarily, but within weeks or months the person returns to their baseline emotional level. Won the lottery? After the initial shock, you adapt to your new financial reality and return to the same kinds of worries and irritations you had before, just in a different context. It's like an emotional treadmill. You chase something, achieve it, feel a brief spike of satisfaction, and then the treadmill returns you to the starting point. And the only response we know is to run faster, to seek the next goal, the next milestone, the next validation. Think of something you wanted intensely in the past: getting into a certain university, getting a certain job, moving to a certain city. At the time it happened, it seemed transformative. Life changed. But a few months later, you probably found yourself having exactly the same kinds of worries, desires, and dissatisfactions you had before. The setting changed. The internal script remained the same. This does not mean that achievements do not matter. It means that they do not deliver what they promise. They do not fill the fundamental void. They do not solve the existential question that drives us. And there's another layer to this broken promise. When we make happiness our ultimate goal, we often neglect things that really contribute to deep well-being: authentic connections, meaning, compassion, community. The culture of maximize your individual happiness can paradoxically isolate us. It focuses so much on me, myself, and mine that we lose sight of the fact that humans are social creatures. Studies consistently show that excessive focus on oneself is correlated with depression and existential emptiness. Meanwhile, altruism, compassion, and a sense of purpose contribute much more to lasting well-being than selfish pleasures. But the cultural narrative does not emphasize this. The narrative says maximize your pleasures, minimize your discomforts, accumulate experiences, show success. It's a recipe for emotional exhaustion disguised as life optimization. So we're caught in a sophisticated trap. We've been taught that the purpose of life is to be happy. But the direct pursuit of happiness makes us less happy. The achievements that should satisfy us leave us empty after the initial glow. And constant comparison with others' displays of happiness makes us feel inadequate even when, objectively, life is working. The problem is not that you are not trying hard enough. The problem is not that you have chosen the wrong goals. The problem is much more fundamental. You have been taught to confuse means with ends. Career, money, relationships, experiences, all are means to something, but they have been sold as ends in themselves, as if accumulating enough of these things would eventually deliver permanent satisfaction. It doesn't. It never has. And people who have reached the absolute top of these hierarchies, extreme wealth, global fame, universal recognition, have discovered in the most brutal way that the promise was empty. Isaac Newton, after revolutionizing science and understanding fundamental laws of the universe, compared himself at the end of his life to a child playing on the beach, picking up pretty shells while the great ocean of truth remained entirely undiscovered before him. All the genius, all the recognition, and yet incompleteness. The feeling that something essential remained out of reach. Leonardo da Vinci on his deathbed confessed, "I have offended God and humanity because my work has not reached the quality it should have." one of the greatest geniuses in human history, creator of immortal works, and his last feeling was one of inadequacy, of failure. As if nothing he had created was enough to fill the inner void. Steve Jobs, after building a technological empire and changing the way billions of people live, expressed significant regrets at the end of his life, especially about neglecting his family in favor of work. As death approached, the man who had everything realized that he had lost what really mattered, and there was no time left to recover. And Jim Carrey, whom we mentioned earlier, achieved everything that popular culture defines as success: fame, fortune, the desire of millions, and discovered that it's not the answer. He saw the promise dissolve in its very fulfillment. So if neither glory, nor wealth, nor universal recognition fills the void, if even those who have won the game of life still feel that something essential is missing, perhaps the problem isn't in the execution. Perhaps the problem is in the game itself. Perhaps we are pursuing the wrong thing, in the wrong way, for reasons we have never critically examined. What if the question isn't how can I be happier, but rather why am I always dissatisfied no matter what I achieve? This second question opens a completely different door. A door that most people never walk through, because it requires something that modern culture has trained us to avoid: looking directly at discomfort, rather than trying to escape it through the next pleasure, the next achievement, the next distraction. But some people have walked through that door, and what they found on the other side completely changed the way they understood not only happiness, but the very structure of human desire. There is something happening just below the surface of consciousness, something we rarely question because it seems too obvious to warrant attention. Question: why do you seek what you seek? The immediate answer seems simple: because I want to be happy, because I want to feel good. But take a closer look. Observe the exact moment when a desire arises. You're sitting, working. Suddenly a restlessness, a slight discomfort, maybe boredom, maybe nameless anxiety. And immediately, almost reflexively, you pick up your phone. You open a social network. You look for a video. You look for a snack. You call someone. Anything to fill the void of that moment. Would you call that seeking happiness? Or would it be more honest to say that you were running away from discomfort? 2,500 years ago, the Buddha offered a devastating observation in the Salatha Sutta, the Arrow Sermon. He noted that when an ordinary person is touched by any kind of pain, stress, boredom, loneliness, irritation, emptiness, they immediately seek sensory pleasure to relieve that feeling. Why? He asks. Because the uninstructed person knows no way to escape the painful feeling other than sensory pleasure. Read that again. It's not that we seek pleasure because it's wonderful in itself. We seek pleasure because it's the only way we know to temporarily escape discomfort. Feeling stressed at work? Have a drink. Feeling lonely? Scroll through the endless feed of artificial connections. Feeling inadequate? Work obsessively to prove your worth through achievements. Pleasure, or the promise of it, acts as a temporary anesthetic for the underlying pain. Modern psychology validates this in a striking way. Studies on addiction, for example, show that as addiction deepens, people don't continue using substances to get high. They use them to avoid feeling even worse. As one expert put it, the addict isn't trying to get extra pleasure, just trying to feel normal or avoid feeling worse. This is negative reinforcement, and it's not limited to chemical dependency. Think about how often you eat not because you're hungry, but because you're anxious. How many times do you buy something not because you need it, but because you feel empty? How many times do you seek validation on social media not out of genuine joy of sharing, but out of fear of being forgotten, ignored, insignificant? Most of what we call the pursuit of happiness is actually a desperate escape from discomfort with our own internal experience. And here's the part no one told you. The pleasure you feel when you satisfy a desire is not something new being added to your experience. It is merely the temporary relief of removing a previous discomfort. Buddhist teachings use a simple and brutal analogy: itching and scratching. Having an itch is unpleasant. Scratching brings relief, and we call that relief pleasurable. But notice, if there were no itch, if your skin were completely healthy, scratching it vigorously would not be pleasurable at all. It would be irritating, maybe even painful. The pleasure of scratching exists only in relation to the pain of itching. Similarly, most of our pleasures are simply the temporary relief of discomforts that we create or allow to accumulate. We don't eat just because food is objectively pleasurable. We eat because hunger is uncomfortable, and eating removes that discomfort. Pleasure is embedded in relief. Let's make this even more concrete. You haven't eaten all day. Hunger grows. An unpleasant, urgent sensation. So you eat a pizza. The first few bites are extraordinary. You would call this pure pleasure. But keep eating. Slice after slice. What happens? Eventually, you become satisfied. Then uncomfortably full. If you continue, you become nauseous. The same food that brought pleasure now brings suffering. As a Tibetan Lama observed with dry irony, when we started eating, it brought relief from the suffering of hunger, and we labeled it pleasure. But as the discomfort of continued eating became gross, we changed the label and called it suffering. What was pleasurable became pure suffering. All that happened was that one suffering stopped, another suffering began. This is not abstract philosophy. It is direct observation of experience. All sensory pleasure follows this pattern. Lying in the sun on a cold day is delightful, until the heat becomes excessive and your skin burns. Getting a promotion is exhilarating, until the stress of the new position becomes overwhelming. Falling in love is transcendent, until conflict, insecurity, or loss bring pain proportional to the initial intensity. Nothing remains. Every pleasurable experience arises dependent on conditions, changes as conditions change, and often reverses into its opposite when prolonged beyond the point of equilibrium. Buddhism calls this the suffering of change, dukkha viparinama. Not that pleasure is bad, but that pleasure cannot be the basis for lasting satisfaction because it is by nature unstable, transient, dependent on conditions that are constantly in flux. And here's the real problem. We spend our entire lives trying to freeze the pleasurable and avoid the painful, as if it were possible to stabilize something that is fundamentally unstable. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The more you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. The more you try to control and maximize pleasure, the more you amplify the feeling that something is wrong when the pleasure inevitably fades. Then the cycle repeats. Discomfort arises. You seek relief through some pleasure or achievement. The pleasure provides temporary relief. Then it disappears. The discomfort returns, sometimes more intense because now you also feel the loss of the previous pleasure. And you seek the next relief, and the next, and the next. It's a treadmill. You walk or run constantly, trying to escape the uncomfortable place you are in, hoping that the next step will finally take you to a place of permanent rest. But the treadmill moves with you. You exhaust energy, but remain essentially in the same emotional place. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, realized something fundamental. Happiness cannot be pursued directly. It must arise as a natural consequence of addressing more meaningful things: purpose, connection, understanding. When you pursue happiness directly, you inadvertently amplify your awareness of its absence. It's like chasing your own shadow. The faster you run toward it, the faster it runs away. You never catch up because the very act of chasing creates distance. Similarly, by constantly trying to grasp pleasure and avoid pain, you reinforce the fundamental idea that something is missing. I can't be okay with things as they are. This perpetuates chronic dissatisfaction, what Buddhism simply calls dukkha, suffering, or more precisely, fundamental unsatisfactoriness. Now the obvious question, if this is the mechanism, if we are stuck in this endless cycle of discomfort, relief, discomfort, is there a way out? Most people's instinctive response is, yes, I need to find the right pleasures, the right goals, the right career, the right relationship, then I'll finally be satisfied. But that's just another cycle of the same wheel. You're proposing that the solution to pursuing things that don't satisfy is to pursue other things. That doesn't break the pattern. It just changes the setting where the pattern unfolds. The real way out, the one almost no one considers, Ibba, is radically different. What if, instead of running from suffering toward pleasure, you stopped? What if, instead of constantly seeking the next relief, you turned and looked directly at the discomfort? Not to punish yourself, not to suffer more, but to understand, where does this come from? What is really happening here? This takes courage, because we have been conditioned to believe that looking directly at discomfort is dangerous, that it will consume us, that the only safe option is to keep running away through distractions, pleasures, achievements. But 2,500 years ago, a young prince who had literally everything, unlimited wealth, protection from any suffering, every imaginable pleasure, chose to do just that. He stopped running away, and he sat under a tree until he completely understood the mechanics of desire itself. What he discovered was not a new way to maximize pleasure. It was not a more efficient technique for achieving happiness. It was something much deeper and much more liberating. He saw that the problem was not that we were seeking the wrong things. The problem was the very structure of the search, the insatiable thirst for more or different or better. That thirst itself was the source of suffering. And when you understand that, not intellectually but viscerally through direct observation, something fundamental changes. Not because you found the right answer, but because you finally understood the question. Siddhartha Gautama was born with everything most people spend their entire lives pursuing. Prince of a small kingdom in what is now Nepal, he was raised in palaces designed specifically to maximize pleasure and eliminate any trace of suffering. His father, determined to protect him from any discomfort, built an artificial world where only beauty, youth, health, and joy were allowed. Music, dance, fine food, lush gardens, everything wealth could buy, everything desire could imagine. Siddhartha was living the ultimate fantasy of modern culture, a life optimized for maximum happiness and zero suffering. And yet, in his late 20s, a deep restlessness began to grow. Not dissatisfaction with anything specific, not visible frustration, just a persistent feeling that something fundamental was missing, that this bubble of pleasure, however comfortable, was a lie. So he did something radical. He escaped from the palace. And for the first time in his life, he saw what had been carefully hidden from him. An elderly man, bent over by the weight of years, a seriously ill person, consumed by pain, a corpse being carried away for cremation, and an ascetic, someone who had renounced worldly pleasures in search of something deeper. These four sights shattered the illusion of the palace. Siddhartha realized something that we all eventually realize but rarely confront. No matter how pleasurable life is, it is fundamentally fragile. Youth fades, health fails, people we love die, and we ourselves will die. Every achievement is temporary. Every joy is unstable. Every moment of comfort is one diagnosis, one accident, one loss away from collapse. This was not pessimism. It was brutal clarity about the human condition. And it was this clarity that led him to abandon literally everything: title, wealth, family, comfort, to find an answer to a question that most people avoid asking. If everything we build inevitably disintegrates, if even the most successful lives end in old age and death, what is the point? Is there any form of freedom that does not depend on circumstances that are constantly changing? For years, Siddhartha experimented with extreme ascetic practices. He fasted until he nearly died. He meditated until he was exhausted. He sought out teachers who promised transcendence through self-flagellation. And he discovered that mortifying the body was as useless as indulging in endless pleasures. Both were ways of avoiding looking directly at the central question. So he stopped. He sat under a fig tree, later to be called the Bodhi tree, and made a simple absolute promise. He would not get up until he fully understood the nature of human suffering. And there, through deep and relentless observation of his own mind, he saw something that changed everything. He saw the complete structure, the hidden mechanism, the reason why no amount of external achievement ever satisfies. What he realized were truths so fundamental to the human experience that they came to be called the Four Noble Truths, not because they are religious dogma, but because they are verifiable diagnoses of how suffering works and how it can cease. The first truth is the most honest and the most difficult to accept. Life as we normally live it is permeated by dukkha. Dukkha is a Pali word that has no perfect translation. Suffering is too strong. Dissatisfaction is too weak. The best way to understand it is as a persistent feeling that something is not quite right, that something is missing, that things could and should be different. It includes obvious suffering, physical pain, loss, trauma, illness. But it also includes more subtle forms. The discomfort of not getting what you want, the discomfort of getting it and realizing it doesn't fulfill you, the discomfort of having something good and knowing it's temporary, the latent anxiety that everything could fall apart at any moment. As the Buddha put it in his first sermon, birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering. Association with what one does not love is suffering. Separation from what one loves is suffering. Not getting what one wants is suffering. In short, the five aggregates of existence subject to attachment are suffering. This is not pessimism. It is inventory. It is recognizing that even the happiest moments carry a fragility. You know they will end. And this awareness, though unconscious most of the time, creates a constant underlying tension, a fear of losing, an urgency to grab and hold on, a refusal to accept the impermanence of absolutely everything. The second truth identifies the cause of this suffering: tanha, thirst, craving, compulsive desire. Not desire in the neutral sense of preference, but desire in the sense of desperate attachment, the compulsion for things to be different from what they are, the constant movement of the mind toward more, better, different, or away from this. There are three main forms of this thirst: thirst for sensory pleasures, thirst for becoming, ambition, identity, self-construction, and thirst for annihilation, escape, non-existence, avoidance. They all operate on the same pattern: rejection of the present as it is. The mind cannot rest. It is always evaluating. Is this good enough? I need more. I need to escape this. I need to become that. And it is this perpetual movement, this refusal to simply be with what is, that generates the friction we call suffering. As one canonical text describes, it is this thirst that leads to renewed existence. thirst for sensory pleasures, thirst for becoming, thirst for non-being. In modern terms, we suffer because we compulsively cling to impermanent things and because we constantly seek satisfaction in ways that are bound to disappoint. The psychological habit of resisting pain and clinging to pleasure keeps us trapped in perpetual dissatisfaction. Thirst is like an itch that can never be completely scratched. You get temporary relief, but it returns. It always returns. Now, here is where the Buddha's teaching becomes radically different from pessimistic or nihilistic philosophies. The third truth proclaims, the end of suffering is possible. If the conditions that generate suffering, thirst and ignorance, are eliminated, suffering itself ceases. This state of liberation is called nirvana, nibbana in Pali, which literally means extinction, like a fire that goes out when it runs out of fuel. What is extinguished is not life. It is not consciousness. It is the fires of greed, aversion, and delusion in the heart, the compulsion to grasp and reject, the perpetual motion of never being satisfied. This is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the complete disappearance and extinction of thirst. To abandon it, renounce it, free oneself from it, not depend on it. Nirvana is not a place. It is not heaven. It is a state of deep peace, the unshakable freedom from the cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. It is described as unprovoked liberation, security that does not depend on any changing conditions. Some texts refer to nirvana as the highest happiness, but crucially, it is not happiness in the mundane sense of a fleeting emotion. It is contentment born of the absence of suffering, the end of internal struggle. Imagine a weight you have carried your entire life finally being placed on the ground. The lightness that remains, the relief, the clarity. This suggests what nirvana is, and the fourth truth offers the map, the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. This is the famous Noble Eightfold Path, not arbitrary rules, not moral commandments imposed by external authority, but a practical and verifiable guide to living in a way that gradually eradicates the causes of suffering. The 8 factors are right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Right here, sama in Pali, means effective or skillful, not morally superior, but functionally aligned with the cessation of suffering. The Buddha emphasized that this path is the middle way between extreme indulgence in pleasures and extreme self-flagellation. It is a balanced approach to gradually purify the mind and uproot thirst. These 8 factors cover all aspects of life: how you understand reality, how you think, how you communicate, how you act, how you earn a living, how you train your mind, how you cultivate presence, and how you develop deep concentration. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. Precisely this noble eightfold path. The Buddha was not offering blind faith. He was saying, this is the diagnosis, this is the cause, this is the possible cure, this is the treatment, test it for yourself. The Buddhist symbol of the 8-spoked wheel of Dharma represents just that, the noble eightfold path. The Buddha said that discovering this path was like finding an ancient road to a lost city, a timeless route traveled by previous awakened ones, which he rediscovered and opened up for everyone. By turning the wheel of Dharma, as it is called, he set in motion a teaching that leads out of suffering. The 8 spokes remind us that each element of the path is essential and interconnected. Just as a wheel allows a cart to move smoothly, the Noble Eightfold Path allows a person to progress toward liberation step by step. And here's what's revolutionary. The Buddha essentially redefined the purpose of life. It wasn't to accumulate pleasures or achievements. He had renounced all of that in his quest. It wasn't to reach a paradise after death. He never promised that. The purpose was to understand suffering and remove its cause, thereby attaining a state of unshakable freedom. He summed up his entire teaching in devastatingly simple terms. One thing I teach, suffering and the end of suffering. This may sound austere at first. Where is the talk of happiness, love, purpose, God? But when you reflect deeply, you realize that everything that really matters is contained in understanding suffering and ending it. Compassion flourishes naturally when you understand what causes suffering. Kindness arises when you stop acting compulsively out of thirst and aversion. Wisdom emerges when you see clearly how things really are, without comfortable illusions. And ending suffering does not mean a dry, emotionless life. On the contrary, those who have followed the Buddha's path often describe a much greater capacity for joy. Not the euphoric joy of fleeting pleasures, but a serene joy rooted in compassion and insight. The Buddha taught that when you remove the thorn of thirst from your heart, authentic happiness, sukha, flows as a natural result. In a sense, he is not against happiness. He wants you to have the highest and most reliable form of happiness possible. But that happiness doesn't come from accumulating more. It comes from letting go. It doesn't come from controlling external circumstances. It comes from transforming your internal relationship with any circumstance. As a Buddhist text puts it, the cessation of suffering, the liberation of the mind, that is supreme happiness. What the Buddha was offering was not a religion to believe in. It was a map to check out, a hypothesis to test in one's own experience. And the hypothesis is this: what you are seeking through achievements, pleasures, and external validations is not out there. It never was. The freedom you long for can only be found through a deep understanding of how your own mind creates suffering and how it can stop. There is a fundamental confusion that most people carry without question. We believe that happiness and the absence of suffering are the same thing. That if we can be happy enough for long enough, suffering will simply disappear. That maximizing positive moments automatically minimizes existential pain. But they are completely different things. Happiness, as we normally conceive it, is a transient emotion. A pleasant state that arises depending on favorable conditions and disappears when those conditions change. It is the feeling of pleasure when eating something delicious, the euphoria of an achievement, the joy of being with someone you love. These are valuable experiences, certainly, but they are waves that rise and fall. They are not a foundation. The end of suffering is something radically different. It is the cessation of the compulsion that makes you depend on these waves to feel good. It is the freedom to be at peace regardless of which waves are coming or going. It is not needing life to be a certain way for you to be okay. And increasingly, modern science is validating what the Buddha realized 2,500 years ago. Pursuing happiness as a direct goal not only fails, it often makes people less happy. Recent psychological studies have found something paradoxical. People who obsessively value happiness and actively pursue it tend to become more anxious and dissatisfied. In a series of experiments, participants who were instructed to value happiness intensely ended up feeling worse when watching what was supposed to be a joyful movie clip. Their high expectations turned normal joy into disappointment. Another study directly observed, desperately wanting to be happy is linked to poorer psychological health. Those who strongly agreed with statements such as "life only has meaning if I'm happy" were more prone to depression and loneliness. Why? Because turning happiness into a goal creates constant evaluation. Am I happy right now? Should I be happier? Why am I not as happy as I expected? The mind cannot relax. Every moment becomes a test, and most normal moments in life fail to deliver the emotional intensity you think you should feel. It's like trying to fall asleep by telling yourself, "I need to sleep, I need to sleep, I need to sleep." The effort itself prevents what you seek. On the other hand, when people focus on addressing real problems, helping others, or finding meaning, happiness often appears as a byproduct. Not as a goal, but as a natural consequence of living in alignment with deeper values. Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps, articulated this perfectly. Happiness must happen, and the same goes for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. I want you to listen to what your conscience tells you to do. Then you will live to see that, in the long run, success will follow you precisely because you forgot to think about it. In other words, seek meaning and right action, and happiness will follow. Seek happiness directly, and it will elude you. This perfectly mirrors the Buddhist approach. Seek the end of suffering through understanding and letting go, and deep contentment will arise naturally. Seek only to be happy, and you will reinforce the very dissatisfaction you are trying to escape. Contemporary mental health experts are coming to the same conclusion. A retired psychiatrist, Dr. Rafa Yuba, wrote, "Happiness is a phantom that is not worth pursuing. There are much wiser goals in life." He suggests that pursuing a permanent, unrealistic bliss is harmful. Instead, we should seek reasonable contentment with intermittent joy and pain, accepting that pain is a natural part of life. This echoes the Buddhist insight. Pain in life is inevitable. We will all experience illness, loss, aging, death. But suffering, the extra anguish we add through resistance, attachment, and mental torment, that is optional. It can be reduced. It can even be eliminated. Think of it this way. Transient happiness is like a pleasant breeze on a summer day, wonderful while it lasts. But you can't capture it and store it in a box. You can't make it stay. Freedom from suffering is like the sky itself, open, vast, containing all weather without being disturbed by it. When you cultivate this sky-like mind through insight and letting go of attachments, breezes of joy can blow through and you enjoy them fully. Storms of pain may come, and you know they too will pass. You are no longer defined by a constant hunger for the next breeze. Many who walk the Buddhist path report a richer emotional life than before. Laughter comes more easily, compassion flows more naturally, because they are not so entangled in I, me, mine all the time. Happiness is not the ultimate goal, but it becomes a frequent companion on the journey once you stop grasping at it at every turn. We see this principle also in everyday heroism and purpose. Consider a dedicated doctor working long hours to save lives, or a parent sacrificing for a child. They may not describe their daily routine as happiness. It can be stressful, exhausting, but they often report a deep sense of fulfillment and meaning. And when success comes, the patient healed, the child thriving, it brings deep joy. That joy wasn't pursued for its own sake. It arose from doing something meaningful and alleviating suffering. As one article on this topic put it, positive thinking and visualizing success can actually make you miserable. Fortunately, other strategies for fulfillment are available. These strategies include practicing gratitude, facing fears, and contributing to others, all aligned with reducing fixation on oneself and personal pleasures. Modern insights are converging with ancient wisdom. Happiness, as pleasurable feelings, is a byproduct, not a goal. A short-term strategy of maximizing pleasure is like constantly licking sugar, momentarily sweet but ultimately harmful. A long-term strategy of minimizing avoidable suffering in oneself and others, and cultivating understanding leads to a stable sense of well-being. The Buddha was not against happiness. He wanted us to have the truest and deepest form of happiness, the kind that comes from freeing the mind from the agitation of constant desire. He often described his enlightenment not in terms of gaining something new, but as cooling and calming. The fires of greed, hatred, and delusion cooled to peace, nibbutta. So if we accept that the true purpose of life may be to end suffering, dukkha, rather than to chase an endless mirage of more happiness, how do we live that out practically? This is where the Noble Eightfold Path becomes our practical framework. It's not abstract theory. It's a verifiable map for transforming how you live, ethically, mentally, relationally. And the beauty of this path is that it doesn't require you to become a monk or renounce modern life. It meets you where you are. Each of the 8 factors can be applied here and now, amid work, family, and daily responsibilities. If you wish to delve even deeper into this journey of understanding and transformation, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Each video here is designed not to comfort, but to awaken, to make visible what has always been operating invisibly, and that visibility changes everything. Let's now explore how the Eightfold Path translates into the reality of life in the 21st century. How can someone with a job, relationships, bills to pay, and a digital presence follow this ancient path in a genuine and transformative way? Right view, Samaditi, is about seeing life realistically, with wisdom. In practice, it means understanding the 4 noble truths as a framework for interpreting experience. Recognizing that life has dukkha, that our attachment causes much of our stress, and that changing our mindset can set us free. In the modern context, right view grows as you educate yourself and reflect. It is adopting a worldview that values truth over comfort. For example, right view is remembering that material things are impermanent, so basing your identity on a car or title will lead to dukkha. It is seeing cause and effect in karma, that your choices have consequences for yourself and others. In daily life, when faced with a challenge, try to see it in light of impermanence. This too shall pass. Interconnection. My actions affect others. And compassion. Everyone, just like me, wants to be happy and not suffer. Such perspectives guide you to respond more skillfully rather than reacting out of blind emotion. Right intention, Samma Sankappa, is the motivation that drives our actions. The Buddha highlighted intentions of renunciation, goodwill, and non-violence as right. Renunciation sounds heavy, but it simply means the intention to let go of selfish desire and attachment. Goodwill means intentions of kindness and benevolence. Non-violence means the intention not to cause suffering to any being. Cultivating right intention in modern life might look like this. Each morning, set a clear intention for your day. Before entering a meeting, you might think, my intention is to be honest and constructive, not driven by ego. Or at the start of the day, today I intend to practice patience and kindness with everyone I meet. In daily life, when a difficult person or temptation arises, remember your deepest intentions. If someone cuts you off in traffic, your usual intention might be retaliation or anger. Right intention would remind you, I wish no harm, may we both be safe. Over time, these intentions shape your character. Right speech, Samavaka, guides our communication. Words are powerful, they can heal or hurt. Right speech involves refraining from lies, divisive speech, slander or gossip that creates divisions, harsh or abusive language, and idle chatter that has no benefit. It encourages speech that is truthful, timely, kind, and helpful. In the digital age, this extends to emails, text messages, and social media posts. Practicing right speech can mean pausing before speaking, or hitting send and asking, is it true? Is it necessary or useful? Is it kind? This doesn't mean you can never be critical, but even criticism can be delivered with respect and useful intent. In everyday life, at work, instead of gossiping about a difficult colleague, right speech would be to address issues directly with them or a supervisor in a factual and solution-oriented manner. At home, it might mean refraining from yelling at your partner in anger and instead communicating your feelings calmly. On social media, it could mean choosing not to spread an unverified rumor or engage in hateful comments. Every time you practice right speech, you contribute to an environment of trust and harmony. You also notice your own mind. To speak truthfully and kindly, you must cultivate honesty and kindness internally. In this way, right speech is training in both external behavior and internal virtue. Right action, Samma Kammanta, refers to ethical conduct in physical actions. The Buddha emphasized refraining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct as central aspects. In contemporary life, this translates into living by fundamental moral principles, respecting life, taking only what is freely given, and exercising sexual responsibility. In everyday life, practicing right action can mean adopting habits such as mindful eating, causing as little harm as possible, choosing not to kill even small creatures unnecessarily, perhaps capturing a spider and releasing it rather than crushing it, and being scrupulously honest in financial matters. Sexual ethics in modern terms means not exploiting others for pleasure, honoring commitments if you are in a relationship, and ensuring consent and compassion in all intimacy. Every action becomes part of your spiritual practice. When faced with a moral dilemma, consult your conscience. Which course of action leads to the least harm and the greatest integrity? By choosing this, even if it is difficult, you will find that a sense of inner peace and self-respect grows. Your life becomes simpler and free of regret because you know you are acting in line with your values. Right livelihood, Samma Ajiva, asks us to reflect on how we earn our livelihood. This factor questions whether the way we spend most of our waking hours is aligned with our deepest values, or whether we are feeding the very kind of suffering we seek to eliminate. The Buddha specifically mentioned occupations to avoid: arms dealing, human trafficking or slavery, meat production or butchery, intoxicants and poisons. Essentially, any occupation that directly harms lives or well-being. For us, right livelihood is a call to reflect on the ethics of our work. Consider what you do for a living and its impact on the world. If you find yourself in a profession that causes harm or conflicts with your values, right livelihood may mean planning a transition to something more aligned. Not everyone can change jobs instantly, but you can begin to steer yourself toward integrity. For example, a marketing professional may refuse to promote a product they know to be harmful or misleading, even if it costs them a contract. An entrepreneur may ensure that the company's practices toward workers, the environment, consumers, are fair and beneficial. It may also mean simplifying your lifestyle so you don't depend on a salary from unethical sources. Many people reduce their material needs in order to have the freedom to choose more meaningful work. If you are a student choosing a career, you may consider not only salary and status, but how the career contributes to society. The essence of right livelihood is alignment between your work and your values, making your daily labor part of the solution to suffering, not part of the problem. When you engage in right livelihood, work becomes a source of joy and pride, knowing that my work benefits others or at least does no harm. This imbues your 9 to 5 with purpose. You are not just trading time for money. You are participating in something greater than yourself. Right effort, Samma Vayama, shifts the focus more inward to mental cultivation. Once your life is on an ethical foundation, the real work begins in the mind. Right effort is about diligence in cultivating healthy mental states and discarding unhealthy ones. The Buddha described this as generating effort to prevent unwholesome qualities, such as greed, anger, jealousy, from arising, abandoning any that have already arisen, and developing and maintaining wholesome qualities, such as mindfulness, loving kindness, generosity. It is essentially healthy psychological self-regulation. In everyday life, right effort can be practiced by being mindful of your mental diet. Just as you make an effort to exercise or eat healthily, you put effort into nourishing your mind. This may mean actively interrupting negative thought patterns. When resentment or worry circulates in your mind, you deliberately shift your focus, perhaps by recalling something you are grateful for, or by performing an act of kindness to change your mood. It also means fostering positive habits. Perhaps you set aside time each day for meditation, study, or reflection, watering the seeds of wisdom. You might consume uplifting content, books, podcasts, instead of endlessly scrolling through anxiety-inducing news. If you notice laziness or apathy dragging you down, right effort motivates you to awaken energy. Perhaps by reminding yourself of your goal to live freely, you encourage yourself. Come on, let's do a few minutes of mindfulness practice instead of just turning on the TV. On the other hand, if you are overdoing it or tense, Right effort also means balancing and not pushing yourself too hard. The right kind of effort has a quality of gentle persistence. Think of cultivating a garden. You consistently water the flowers, positive states, and carefully remove weeds, negative states. Over time, your inner garden grows calmer and more joyful because of these small daily efforts. Right mindfulness, samasati, has become a buzzword today, but in the Buddha's path, it has a specific and profound role. Right mindfulness is the practice of present moment awareness applied constantly to the body, feelings, mind, and principles of reality. It means maintaining clear, non-reactive attention to whatever is happening now without attachment or aversion. In simple terms, it is being fully aware and awake in your life. You can do formal meditation, for example, sitting quietly observing your breath or doing a body scan, noticing sensations and thoughts without judgment. And you can cultivate mindfulness informally in daily activities, eating, walking, washing dishes, or typing an email, doing each thing with total presence. Instead of your body doing one thing while your mind is lost elsewhere, you gather yourself in the here and now. If you are drinking a cup of tea, just drink the tea. Feel the warmth, savor the flavor, be aware of the subtle sensations and gratitude for this simple pleasure. When emotions arise, mindfulness notes them. Anger is present or sadness is here. Rather than immediately acting on them or repressing them, you observe them like a passing cloud. This simple, not easy but simple practice of observing without immediate reaction gives you insight and choice. Mindfulness is the opposite of operating on autopilot. For example, with mindfulness, you may find yourself about to yell at your child out of habit, and pause, breathing, recognizing frustration in me. That moment of conscious pause can save you from saying something harmful and allow for a more considered response. In a very real sense, right mindfulness is one of the most transformative tools on the path. It allows you to see the processes of your mind and life clearly. As the Buddha said, mindfulness is the only way to overcome sorrow and realize nibbana. Cultivating it leads to profound insights. You begin to see impermanence in action. Your thoughts and feelings are constantly changing. You see suffering, tension arise when you cling, and you glimpse that there is no fixed self in these changing processes, just an evolving stream. These insights pave the way to liberation. But even on a mundane level, mindfulness makes life rich and vivid because you are truly here for it, not lost in the past or future. Every ordinary moment, the sound of birds, the touch of a loved one, the taste of food, becomes more appreciated because you are present to experience it fully. Right concentration, sammasamadhi, refers to developing deep mental focus and unification, often through meditation. In the Buddhist context, it points specifically to the jhanas, states of deep meditative absorption and stillness. Right concentration means that the mind can remain stable and undistracted, peacefully focused on a wholesome object. Not everyone will achieve jhana or even know what it is, but the spirit of right concentration in daily life is to cultivate the ability to focus deeply and calmly. You can start with a daily meditation practice, even just 5 to 10 minutes, where you focus on your breath or a phrase or visualization, training your mind to return when it wanders. Over weeks and months, this practice strengthens your mental muscles of attention. You will notice the difference when doing tasks. You can read or work with less mental wandering. You can listen to someone without your mind disconnecting. You may even experience moments of flow, a concentrated state where time flies and you are totally immersed. Right concentration is also about calmness. In our overstimulated age, training in concentration is an antidote to the fragmented and anxious mind. For example, if you find your mind racing at night, concentration practices such as focusing on your breath or systematically relaxing each part of your body can gather those scattered thoughts and induce tranquility. Some people use prayers or mantras, repeated phrases, for a similar effect. This focus on a single point dispels ruminative thinking and brings peace. Eventually, a well-concentrated mind can enter into blissful stillness in meditation, the jhana states, which deeply refreshes the mind and provides a taste of liberation. But even without pursuing special states, any step toward greater concentration and calm will tremendously support the other factors of the path. It becomes easier to be mindful, apply effort, and maintain ethics when your mind is not a wild monkey. Concentration tames the monkey mind into a stable elephant, capable of great power and gentleness. These 8 factors should not be worked on one after another in sequence. They support each other simultaneously. It is often represented as an 8-spoked wheel precisely because all the spokes must be strong for the wheel to turn smoothly. If one area is weak, say if someone tries to meditate, right mindfulness and concentration, but lives unethically, wrong livelihood or action, progress will falter. On the other hand, improvement in one factor helps the others. For example, practicing mindfulness, factor 7, will naturally lead you to speak and act more carefully, factors 3 and 4, because you are more aware of what you are doing. Living ethically gives you a clear conscience that improves concentration in meditation. It is a holistic way of life, not a list of selective choices. Modern Buddhist teachers sometimes refer to practicing the Eightfold Path as cultivating a complete way of life. This means that we do not treat spirituality as something separate from everyday life. Your commute, your cooking, your conversations, your entertainment choices, everything becomes part of the training. Every moment is an opportunity to practice one or more factors of the path. Stuck in traffic? Perhaps practice patience and mindful breathing. Right effort, mindfulness. Faced with a moral decision at work, reflect on right view and right intention to guide you. Feeling depressed and purposeless? Recall right view that all things change, and perhaps do an act of generosity to lift your mind, which also triggers right effort to cultivate a healthy state. The beautiful thing is that as you walk this path, the quality of dukkha in your life begins to diminish. You may notice that you don't get as angry as you used to, or if you do, it passes more quickly with mindful awareness. Your mind is not constantly buzzing with desires and worries. There is more contentment in simple things. Relationships improve because you communicate more honestly and kindly. Even when external difficulties arise, and they will, the path does not magically prevent illness, loss, or economic problems. You find that you can face them with more equanimity and courage. You suffer less because you understand better and don't amplify with resistance or panic. As one insight meditation teacher put it, the Noble Eightfold Path offers us a way through life that is much wiser and more intentional than the meandering path of continual suffering that our human conditioning naturally leads us down. By living intentionally according to these principles, you step off the meandering circular path of least resistance, which led us nowhere but back to dissatisfaction, and onto a path of purpose. Importantly, the Noble Eightfold Path is not a rigid checklist of do's and don'ts. It is a flexible framework to be creatively integrated into your life. A layperson in the 21st century may not practice exactly as a monk in ancient India, but the essence is the same. Whether you're a teacher, engineer, artist, or stay-at-home parent, you can live by these factors. As an example, a teacher friend of mine saw her classroom as a field of practice. She maintained right intention every morning. May I help these children learn and be kind. Practice right speech in how she spoke to the children. No harshness, lots of encouragement. Right mindfulness in listening to them deeply. Right effort in continually improving her teaching skills, and so on. This transformed not only her experience of teaching, it became a kind of joyful service rather than just a job, but also influenced the children who felt her genuine care and presence. In Western countries today, many people are embracing mindfulness and ethical living, even if they don't label it as Buddhist. The universality of the Eightfold Path is such that one could follow it entirely as a secular and psychological lifestyle and still reap immense benefits. You don't have to believe in rebirth or any specific doctrine to see that lying less makes your life simpler, or mindfulness makes you less stressed, or generosity makes you happier than selfishness. The Buddha's insight can be verified in our own experience here and now. In fact, he encouraged people to come and see Ehipassiko, to test for themselves, not merely accept on faith. By implementing the path, we begin to fulfill what the Buddha identified as the true purpose of life, not to achieve X, Y, Z, but to gradually free ourselves from the shackles of greed, hatred, and delusion, the root causes of suffering. Day by day, precept by precept, breath by breath, we peel away layers of our habitual discontent, and what emerges is something unexpected, a foundation of contentment and wisdom that is not so easily shaken by the ups and downs of life. We become, in a sense, our own island of stability. As the Buddha advised, be an island unto yourselves, a refuge unto yourselves, with no other refuge, taking the Dhamma, truth and path as your guide. There is a moment on the path, not necessarily dramatic, not necessarily sudden, when something fundamental shifts. You have spent your entire life operating under an invisible premise, that the solution to inner discomfort lies somewhere outside yourself, in the next goal, in the next achievement, in the right person, in the right place, in the right experience, always in the next step. And then, through the constant practice of observing your own mind, through mindfulness, letting go of small attachments, living with more integrity, you begin to realize something disconcerting. The problem was never that you didn't have enough. The problem was the belief that you needed more. The problem was never that circumstances were wrong. The problem was the refusal to be present with circumstances as they are. The problem was never the absence of happiness. The problem was the presence of an insatiable thirst that turned even happy moments into fuel for anxiety. I'm going to lose this, I need more of that, why isn't this enough? This insight doesn't come from philosophical reasoning. It comes from direct observation. You literally see desire arise. You see how it creates tension. You see how it passes. And you see that when there is no desire operating, when the mind is simply present without grasping or rejecting, there is a peace that doesn't depend on anything external. That peace has always been available. You were just too busy chasing the next thing to notice it. It's like spending your whole life looking for your glasses when they're on your head. The search was the problem, not the absence of the object. In Buddhist teachings, this kind of insight is sometimes described as seeing the Dharma, seeing the truth directly. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. It's irreversible, not because someone convinced you intellectually, but because you witnessed the mechanism operating in your own experience. You saw how desire for something creates the feeling that something is missing. You saw how satisfying that desire brings temporary relief, followed by the emergence of a new desire. And you saw that this cycle can be broken, not by getting everything you want, but by letting go of the compulsion to grab. This doesn't mean you stop having preferences. It doesn't mean you become indifferent to life. It means your preferences no longer control you. You can enjoy things without grasping. You can experience loss without collapsing. You can have plans without being psychologically dependent on them coming to fruition. You discover a strange freedom, the freedom to be okay regardless of what is happening. This is the complete reversal. You spent decades trying to organize the external world to feel good internally. And now you realize that the only thing you really needed to change was your internal relationship to any external circumstance. Not that circumstances don't matter. Obviously they matter. Physical pain is real. Loss is real. Injustice is real. But the additional suffering, the layer of mental anguish, resistance, why is this happening to me? The feeling that your life is ruined, that layer is optional. And when that layer begins to dissolve, what remains is not cold emptiness. It is something surprisingly alive. An ability to be present with what is, even with pain, even with difficulty, without being consumed by it. Buddhist teachers sometimes describe this as the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is the direct physical or emotional sensation, inevitable as part of human life. Suffering is the mental narrative we build around the pain. This shouldn't be happening. I can't bear this. My life is ruined. I'm going to feel this way forever. When you let go of that narrative, not through forced positive thinking, but by seeing directly that it is just narrative, not reality, the pain may still be present, but the additional suffering diminishes dramatically. There is a Zen story about this. Two monks are walking when they meet a woman who needs to cross a river but is afraid of getting her clothes wet. One of the monks carries her on his back, crosses the river, and sets her down on the other side. They continue walking. Hours later, the other monk explodes. "How could you do that? We are forbidden to touch women." The first monk calmly replies, "I left her at the river. Are you still carrying her?" The story points to something crucial. It is not the event itself that creates lasting suffering. It is our inability to let go of it. We continue to mentally carry things that are already over, reliving, re-experiencing, reinforcing. And the Buddhist path trains you, progressively, to let go, not through repression, not by pretending that difficult things didn't happen, but by seeing clearly, this happened, it caused pain, and now it's over. I can choose to stop carrying it. This is liberation, not as a theoretical concept, as a lived capacity. So we return to the question we started with. What is the true purpose of life? The answer that modern society sold you was to be happy, to accumulate enough achievements, experiences, and pleasures to maintain a state of continuous satisfaction. But we have seen how this formula fails, how even those who won the game still feel empty, how the very pursuit of happiness sabotages it, how pleasure always turns into its opposite when conditions change. The Buddha offered something radically different, not a new strategy for maximizing pleasure, but an invitation to understand why we are always dissatisfied, and to free ourselves from the very structure of dissatisfaction. The purpose of life in the Buddhist view is not to achieve something, it is to let go of something. Letting go of the belief that you are incomplete, letting go of the compulsion that things must be different for you to be okay, letting go of identifying with narratives about who you are and what you need to be valid. And when you let go, when you truly viscerally let go, what remains is not emptiness. It is a fullness that does not depend on anything, a peace that doesn't need favorable conditions to exist, a joy that arises naturally when you stop looking for it. This isn't abstract mysticism. It's as practical as learning not to scratch an itch. At first, the compulsion is strong, but the more you resist, the more you realize that the itch eventually goes away on its own, and you didn't create a wound in the process of scratching. Similarly, the more you resist the compulsion to fix every discomfort with some external pleasure, the more you realize that the discomfort was temporary, and that seeking constant relief only perpetuated the cycle. Nirvana, the word Buddha used for complete liberation, literally means extinction. Like a fire that goes out when there is no more fuel, The fire of compulsive desire goes out when you stop feeding it. And what remains is not darkness, it is light. But here's the ultimate paradox, the crucial point that most people miss. You can't achieve this freedom by treating it as yet another goal to conquer. If you think, okay, I'm going to practice the Eightfold Path so I can finally achieve nirvana and be permanently happy, you've just replaced one object of desire with another. You're still operating on the same pattern. When I get that thing, then I'll be satisfied. The real practice is much more subtle. It's letting go of the need to get anywhere. It is being present with every step of the way, not because it leads you somewhere better, but because this moment, exactly as it is where life is happening. You practice right speech not to eventually become enlightened. You practice because speaking with truth and kindness is its own reward. It reduces suffering now. It creates trust now. It clarifies your mind now. You practice mindfulness not to achieve some special altered state. You practice because being present with a cup of tea, with a breath, with your child talking, that is life. And you were missing it while you were lost in thoughts about the past and future. You live ethically not because you will be rewarded in heaven or in a future life. You live ethically because integrity is its own reward. Sleeping with a clear conscience. Looking in the mirror and knowing that you have not harmed anyone today. That is freedom. The path then is not about postponing satisfaction until you reach enlightenment. It's about discovering that every step of the way is the thing itself. Liberation is not a destination. It's a way of walking. And that changes everything, because it means you don't have to wait until you get there to experience peace. You don't have to wait until you've achieved everything to feel complete. You don't have to wait until you control all circumstances to be okay. You can be okay right now, not because everything is perfect, but because you have stopped demanding perfection as a prerequisite for being present with life. Many people get a glimpse of this in unexpected moments, perhaps while walking in nature, when suddenly the mental chatter stops and there is only sea presence. Sky, trees, air, you. No separation, no problem, no lack. Just that. Or perhaps sitting quietly after everyone has gone to sleep, when for a moment there is nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing to achieve. And in that space there is a peace that did not come from adding anything. It came from stopping trying to add something. These glimpses show that the freedom you seek is not in the future. It is always available here when you stop chasing it. The Buddha did not offer a business plan for happiness. He offered something much more radical, a way out of the whole search. And the beautiful paradox is that when you stop seeking happiness, it appears, not as something you have finally captured, but as something that was there all along, obscured by the search itself. People who walk deeply on this path report not less joy, but more. Not less love, but more. Not less engagement with life, but more. Because they no longer filter everything through. Does this serve me? Does this make me happy? Does this bring me closer to where I want to be? They are simply here, fully, with whatever is happening. And there is an impressive freedom in that. A lightness, a humor about the seriousness with which we took everything. A natural compassion for others still stuck in the same cycle you were in. Viktor Frankl, whom we saw earlier, discovered something similar in the concentration camps. Amid the most extreme suffering imaginable, he noticed that those who found meaning, whether through love for someone, through a task to accomplish, or through dignity in how they endured suffering, were the ones who maintained their sanity and even experienced moments of transcendence. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man except one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." The Buddha would expand on this. Not only can you choose your attitude, you can transform the very texture of your consciousness through dedicated practice, so that freedom grows and suffering diminishes. This is the ultimate discovery. The purpose of life is not to fill a void with achievements. It is to realize that there never was a void, only a belief that there was and a frantic search based on that belief. When the search ceases, what you always were, conscious, present, capable of peace, simply is. This does not mean that you stop having goals or stop acting in the world. It means that your goals no longer control you. Your sense of okayness does not depend on them. You work, create, love, participate, but from a place of fullness, not lack. And strangely, this tends to make you more effective, because you are not acting out of neurotic need. You are acting out of clarity and compassion. So the invitation is not to believe any of this. The invitation is to check it out for yourself. Take one element of the Eightfold Path and practice it sincerely for a few weeks. Notice what changes. Maybe start with right speech. Observe before you speak. Is this true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? And notice how it affects your mind, your relationships, your sense of integrity. Or maybe start with 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation every day. Just sit, observe your breath, notice when your mind wanders, gently bring it back. and see if over time you develop more capacity to be present, less reactivity. Or maybe just pause when desire arises. Don't automatically satisfy it. Just observe. Desire for X is present. How does that feel? Where does it come from? What happens if I just observe without acting? These are empirical practices, experiments you can conduct in the laboratory of your own life. And if you conduct them honestly, not expecting immediate magical results but applying constant effort, you will begin to see what the Buddha saw. That suffering has a cause, that the cause can be removed, and that when it is removed, what remains is natural peace. This is not reserved for saints or monks. It is available to anyone willing to look honestly at their own experience and work with it patiently. The door is open. The path is mapped out. The journey begins not when you reach enlightenment, but the moment you choose to stop running away from yourself and start investigating what is really going on. And that can begin right now, with this breath, in this moment. Without needing permission, without needing perfect circumstances, without needing anything other than the willingness to see. This is the answer that the Buddha found under the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago. And it remains as true and available today as it was then. The purpose of life is not what 99% of people think. It is not accumulated happiness. It is not stacked achievement. It is not maximized pleasure. It is freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of insatiable desire. Freedom from the belief that you need more to be complete. Freedom to be present with life exactly as it is, with all its joys and pains, gains and losses, births and deaths. And when you find that freedom, you discover that what you were looking for through 1,000 external searches was here all along, not as something to be achieved, but as something to be recognized. You are already the sky. You have just identified with the passing clouds for so long that you forgot. This video was an invitation to remember, so I leave you with a question, not to answer in the comments, but to carry with you. What are you carrying that you could let go of? What desire, what narrative, what search do you continue to feed that only perpetuates dissatisfaction? And if you stopped, even for a moment, what would remain? Watch the next videos on the channel. Each one is designed to make visible what operates invisibly, to open cracks in the narrative you were taught to believe, to invite you to awakening, not as a future mystical event, but as a possibility present in every conscious moment. Count on me and follow the white rabbit.